Great. Thank you very much. Okay, guys. Sorry, if I could just ask for a bit of quiet, just to introduce Scott Mingus, who's kindly made time available for us today. He's just come out of vacation, but very kindly going to spend some time with us today talking about the Gettysburg campaign, some particularly new aspects of it perhaps we haven't read so much about, which is a lot to do with the movements of the Confederate Army in advance of the battle. Scott is a very eminent author. He's written over 20 books on the subject of the Civil War, many on the Battle of Gettysburg. He very kindly spoke for us on Shiloh, slightly different from his main area of focus before, but it was a tremendous talk. And he's going to help explain to us the background to the battle today. So thanks so much for joining us, Scott. Over to you.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Thumbs up? Yeah. Sounds good. Thanks. Again, my name is Scott Mingus. I'm calling you from Pennsylvania. When we first talked about doing this presentation, I realized almost everybody's got a really good understanding of the Battle of Gettysburg. It's probably certainly the most publicized battle of the American Civil War, with more than 1,000 books written on it. And not quite as many people are aware of what led up to the Battle of Gettysburg. Gettysburg is one of the few battles in the Civil War where the Northern troops came from the south and the Southern troops came from the north to reach the battlefield. So we're going to talk today about why that was, why the Confederates were actually coming from the north as they launched their attacks. Come back with me to the summer of 1863. Here in Pennsylvania, there were two harvests during that period of time. There was the summer harvest where people brought in the summer wheat, the flax, the rye, a lot of the early crops. In the fall harvest was when they brought in the pumpkins and the corn, slaughtered their hogs and their cattle, etc. The summer harvest, though, was a very commercial harvest. It was very important to the people of this region. And make no mistake about it, Robert E. Lee was timing his invasion of Pennsylvania to match that summer harvest season, because one of his many reasons for coming into Pennsylvania was the fact that he needed to draw the armies out of Virginia. Obviously, his number one goal was to win a victory in northern soil, particularly in south central Pennsylvania, which was known as Copperhead or anti-Lincoln country. But his secondary goals, one of his most important one, was to get the armies out of Virginia. They've been feeding both the armies of Northern Virginia and the Army of the Potomac for more than 18 months. The food supplies in Virginia were so bad that Lee's army was actually bringing cattle and food up by rail all the way from Florida into Virginia. So the War Department, of course, wanted to take a lot of the pressure off the farmers and give them a chance to have a season where they could actually replenish their crops. Another key goal that Lee had of the Gettysburg campaign was to divert attention from Vicksburg. And in this, again, just like the first goal of getting food supplies, he's also ultimately going to be successful because the United States Army is shipping the Ninth Corps under Ambrose Burnside from Cincinnati, Ohio, down to Mississippi to reinforce U.S. Grant at Vicksburg. The invasion of Pennsylvania will cause Burnside's men to turn around, and those trains will steam back to Ohio, and they will be on their way to Pennsylvania by the time the Battle of Gettysburg is fought. Lee also wants to destroy most of the Union railroads in this area. All of the coal used for the Union blockade, all of the coal used for that blockade came from a 5-county region here in Pennsylvania. It was anthracite coal. It burned without significant amounts of smoke, enabling the blockading ships to not be seen where the blockade runners coming in from England or coming in from the Caribbean typically were running bituminous coal, and you could see the big plumes of black smoke. So destroying those railroads that were bringing coal from northern Pennsylvania down to Maryland and Virginia was a critical part of the campaign. The final point, and the most important point that I alluded to earlier, is to win a victory on northern soil. What a lot of folks, particularly from outside of Pennsylvania, and of course, obviously in the UK, may not realize is just how strong the anti-Lincoln sentiment was in south central Pennsylvania in 1863. Back in 1860, this area had voted overwhelmingly against Lincoln. In fact, Manheim Township, which is here about 10 miles from York, where I live, Manheim Township gave 174 votes to the Vice President of the United States, Kentucky-born Southern Democrat John Breckinridge, and only 2 votes to Abraham Lincoln. So you can just see how overwhelming the border counties were in Pennsylvania in their anti-Lincoln sentiment. And so the Confederate War Department certainly wanted to draw the Yankees into a battle in South Central Pennsylvania, where these so-called Copperheads or peace Democrats that dominated the politics in this region would then appeal to the governor and the powers that be to negotiate for peace. Now, the Gettysburg campaign, both sides are relatively similar. Numbers vary, but the best estimates are about 90,000 men in the Union Army, about 70,000 men in the Confederate Army. And as we all know, the big issue here is Stonewall Jackson had died. What folks may not realize is it was Jackson who had been all along proposing the invasion of Pennsylvania. Back in June of 1862, during the Shenandoah Valley campaign, Jackson had called a Confederate congressman into his tent and had told the congressman, if you give me 36,000 men, I will take the war to the banks of the Susquehanna River, which of course ran through Harrisburg, the capital of Pennsylvania. So Jackson didn't get his 36,000 men. Instead, he got transferred to the Virginia Peninsula after the Valley campaign concluded. And there, of course, Robert E. Lee would take over the army in Northern Virginia, and Jackson would continue to expand on his idea of coming to Pennsylvania. Lee thought that was a good idea. They decided to invade Pennsylvania in the fall of 1862. That invasion is thwarted at the Battle of Sharpsburg or Antietam. But a month later, Lee does send Jeb Stuart and his entire cavalry across the border into Pennsylvania. They would spend 2 days here in the Keystone State destroying railroads and creating a lot of mischief and capturing fresh horses. Ever since that raid in October of 1862, Jackson and Lee continue to plan the invasion of Pennsylvania one more time, only this time with more men, 70,000 men. But Jackson's dead, killed, of course, by his own men at Chancellorsville. But his idea of coming to Pennsylvania has really lived. He has sent a number of spies into Pennsylvania between February and March of 1863. These spies have been all over South Central Pennsylvania, and they will be gathering information that map maker Jedediah Hotchkiss will turn into, at the time, the most detailed map created of South Central Pennsylvania. So Lee's got everything except Jackson. He's got the maps, he's got the intelligence, he's got the information, he's got the forces. On June 3rd, 1863, the Gettysburg campaign begins when parts of the Confederate Army start pulling out of the Fredericksburg, Virginia area, about a month or so after the Battle of Chancellorsville, and start pulling to the southwest towards Spotsylvania Courthouse. From there, they are going to push to the west and then start bending to the north, heading towards the Shenandoah Valley on June 4th. Over the next 4 days, more and more the Confederate Army pulls out of Fredericksburg, leaving behind the Third Corps under Ambrose Powell Hill. Those men will set up large bonfires at night. They will have troops and bands marching and playing throughout the day to give the illusion that the entire Confederate Army was still in place, when in reality it was only 1/3 of the army, and the other 2/3 were on a mission to head towards Pennsylvania. On June 6th, John Bell Hood and most of Longstreet's First Corps reached the Culpeper, Virginia area. Jeb Stuart's already there with most of his cavalry, and Hill's Corps spreads out to create the illusion that the entire line is still under full support. On June 9th, the first battle of the Gettysburg campaign will take place when Jeb Stuart will encounter Union cavalry near Brandy Station, a train station on the Orange and Alexandria Railroad, which ran from the Washington, D.C. area into the heart of Northern Virginia. This battle on June 9th, an excellent battle, by the way, to war game. Brandy Station becomes the first significant time that the Union Army can stop Stuart. Well, they don't technically defeat Stuart. They do hold the ground, and Stuart withdraws in what's probably a tactical draw, but a strategic Union victory. All that's a prelude to what's going to happen in Pennsylvania. The problem for the U.S. War Department is, what is Robert E. Lee going to do? The Army of the Potomac is still sitting opposite Fredericksburg, still held in place by A.P. Hill. President Lincoln and a number of the senior officials in Washington, D.C., believe that the real threat is still Washington, or possibly Baltimore, Maryland, which would cut Washington off from the north. So they ordered Joseph Hooker, commanding the Union Army, to keep his men in a position to protect the roads to Washington and Baltimore. But here in Pennsylvania, our governor, a Republican by the name of Andrew Curtin, is convinced that the goal is Harrisburg. He had learned from intelligence, his own state intelligence forces, back in 1862 that Harrisburg was Lee's goal during the Antietam campaign. They had seen Jeb Stuart cross the border in October of 62, as mentioned, and the governor is fully convinced that Lee's intentions in 1863 are to come back to Pennsylvania. He sends a series of frantic telegrams to President Lincoln and to the War Department, Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, as well as the General-in-Chief of the Army, Henry Halleck, all but demanding that troops be sent to Pennsylvania. The War Department, not convinced at all that there will be an invasion, responds by sending one lone major general and his staff. His name's Darius Couch, who had been a commander of the Union Second Corps at the Battle of Chancellorsville, but had resigned from the Army of the Potomac out of frustration with General Hooker, the commander. They send Couch up to Pennsylvania to assess what's really going on and to try to calm the governor down. He arrives here on June 10th in downtown Harrisburg and is appalled by what he finds. He finds that the state of Pennsylvania does not have a National Guard. They don't have standing militia. There are only a few dozen U.S. troops in Harrisburg, and he's got a big problem. If he counts Harrisburg and the surrounding communities, he can scratch together about 250 trained U.S. soldiers. And if he believes the intelligence reports, 70,000 Confederates are on their way to Pennsylvania. So Couch sends telegrams back to Washington saying, we do need the men, and we need them in a hurry. By that point in time, the Confederates are now starting to enter the Shenandoah Valley. On June 12th, the entirety of Richard Ewell's Second Corps cross over the Bull Run Mountains and enter the Shenandoah Valley, the main valley in the Mid-Atlantic region. It happens to end in Pennsylvania as the Cumberland Valley, and the Cumberland Valley ends in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So if you're planning on an invasion of the Keystone State and an attack on Harrisburg, Shenandoah Valley is the avenue of invasion. It's the main way to reach Pennsylvania from Virginia. And Ewell's entire army is now arriving in the Shenandoah Valley. We happen to be here on June 15th on the actual anniversary of the third day of the Second Battle of Winchester. This is the second largest battle of the entire Gettysburg campaign. It's a battle that most historians overlook in their books on Gettysburg or downplay, but it's a significant Confederate victory. There are about 8,000 Union troops guarding the main road through the Shenandoah Valley that leads into Maryland and Pennsylvania. They're going to lose about 4,000 of those men as prisoners of war. This will be the United States Army's highest percentage loss of prisoners of war until Corregidor in the Philippines in World War II. So this is an unmitigated disaster. The Confederates lose less than 300 men. Milroy loses half of his 8,000 soldiers at Second Winchester. He does delay the Confederate invasion of Pennsylvania by 3 days, which will prove to be somewhat significant as the campaign develops. But Milroy is in fact disgraced, won't lead troops in battle for another year, and his division will be never reconstituted. They'll be scattered among other units. This rather obscure battle, again, a very fine battle war game as well. The Second Battle of Winchester, though, opens the door to Pennsylvania. And what it does is it creates panic in Washington because now everybody understands that Lee is heading somewhere. Still, nobody's 100% certain that he's going to Pennsylvania. But Lincoln is going to call out 100,000 volunteers. 25,000 from Ohio, including my great-great-grandfather, to guard the Ohio River in case Lee decides to go to Ohio. 25,000 of these 100,000 volunteers are from the soon-to-be state of West Virginia. On June 20th, keep in mind it's June 15th, after the news of the Battle Second Winchester's reached Washington. In 5 days, West Virginia will become a brand new state. The U.S. government will carve it out from Virginia. And there's significant thought that Lee's goal is actually Wheeling and Charleston, West Virginia, that he wants to keep the northwestern part of Virginia in the state and not allow the U.S. government to create a new state. However, hedging his bet, Lincoln gives half of the 100,000 men, 50,000 volunteers. He authorizes Pennsylvania to call up that number of troops. This is Governor Andrew Curtin of Pennsylvania. You see in the background one of my war games of the Confederate or Union soldiers, cavalry arriving in preparation for the Gettysburg campaign. Governor Curtin issues this broadside that you see here that the enemy is approaching. He doesn't say the enemy might be coming to Pennsylvania. Maybe they're going to Ohio. No, he says the enemy is approaching, warning the residents of Pennsylvania that the goal is, of course, Harrisburg. The problem is most Pennsylvanians don't believe the governor. The people in the southern part of the state, again, peace-loving Democrats, don't necessarily want this Republican firebrand to have his way, and they don't believe that there's going to be a war, or at least the war isn't going to come to Pennsylvania. Other members of Pennsylvania have already fought in the military. They've did their time. They're home. They just want to get their crops in. The summer harvest is nearing. And so out of the 50,000 volunteers that Lincoln has asked for in Pennsylvania, only 7,000 men are going to show up and actually enlist. All 25,000 show up and enlist in Maryland or in West Virginia, and all 25,000 in Ohio. Those full complements of troops are raised. There in Pennsylvania, again, because there's the ambivalence towards Lincoln and the fact that so many men have already engaged in the army and have gotten out, only 7,000 people, as mentioned, show up. These 7,000 soldiers are assembled in Harrisburg. They're given uniforms and guns. They are hastily trained, and I mean hastily trained. Many of these people are government clerks, postal carriers, factory workers, office boys, college boys, high school kids. They're really not soldier material. In fact, most of the 7,000 men have never fired a gun at all. Yeah, they do have some farm boys who have some experience with weapons and are expert hunters, but by and large, most of these 7,000 volunteers are not familiar with the use of guns. Governor Curtin and General Couch are going to send 3,000 men into York and Adams and Lancaster counties to try to protect the southern route into the Susquehanna River. The other 4,000 Pennsylvania volunteers will stay in Harrisburg. The Republican Governor Curtin swallows his pride and sends telegrams to the Democratic governors in New York and New Jersey. Both states have standing National Guard units that are full-time. And so 10,000 New Yorkers and 1,000 New Jersey troops board trains and start heading towards Harrisburg. They will arrive in time to augment the 4,000 Pennsylvanians to protect the river crossings into Harrisburg. With the 10,000 men on the way, Governor Curtin has the Pennsylvania volunteers start erecting earthworks and building forts to protect the access. Now, Harrisburg happens to be on the east side of the Susquehanna River. All the defenses are on the west side of the river because there were only two major bridges that led into the town. And if you control those bridges, the Confederates can't come. Meanwhile, down in Virginia, the Union Army has moved from Fredericksburg to Manassas Junction in the general area where the two battles of Bull Run had been fought in 1861 and 62. But a lot of the Army camps at a place called Gum Spring. It's a wilderness type area filled with a lot of snakes and mosquitoes and all kinds of pestilences. It's also filled with Confederate bushwhackers. And any Union soldier that ventures from the camp, often the Confederates will find them and execute them. And so the Union soldiers will not get the campaign off to a good start, as dozens of Union soldiers are found strung up from the hills, having been killed, hung, executed, slaughtered in various formats. So it's a very, very ugly and foreboding beginning. This is a absolutely awful place for a campsite, and the morale in the Union Army is quite low, at least for the men that have to camp in and around Gum Springs. While that's going on, Jeb Stuart gets active again after the Battle of Brandy Station. He is going to fight the Union cavalry at three separate small battles at Audi, Middleburg, and Upperville. Again, really good little battles for skirmish wargaming, particularly if you like to play around with guys on horseback. But Stuart's main goal in these three battles is to keep the Union cavalry out of the Shenandoah Valley and to make sure that the intelligence that the Confederate infantry is marching north is kept secret. And so these three small battles, while they don't cause a lot of casualties, they are highly successful in Stuart shielding the access to the Shenandoah Valley. He does a brilliant job at these three battles of keeping the Union cavalry guessing as to what's going on. And so the intelligence going back to Washington continues to be muddied. Nobody's 100% sure what in the world Lee's intentions are, other than the governor of Pennsylvania, who continues to frantically tell Washington to get the Army of the Potomac moving towards Pennsylvania. Governor Curtin is almost insubordinate at times, with his good friend Abraham Lincoln basically saying, get off your butt and get something done. I need the Army, and I need the Army here now. Well, as all this is going on, your papers in the UK, as well as in France and in Mexico, Canada, places like that, are covering the campaign. Eric Wittenberg and I read every copy of British newspapers that are available online from the month of June and July 1863, when we wrote our two-volume set, If We're Striking for Pennsylvania. It was very enlightening to learn the English reaction to what was going on in the United States. Certainly feelings in the UK were mixed. There was a certain element, particularly royalty and some of the wealthy land barons that supported the South. Some of the common folks certainly supported the Union. It was kind of a mixed bag. But as ships arrived from the United States into English and Irish ports, there was a frantic rush by the media to interview passengers arriving from America to try to learn the latest news on the Confederate movements. And Parliament was receiving pressure particularly from some of the wealthy merchants in London to see what they could do to intervene. And in Mexico, of course, there was tremendous pressure on Napoleon, as well as in France, that perhaps the Mexican troops that are stationed in Mexico, or French troops that are stationed in Mexico, might want to cross the border and join the war. June 22nd through the 25th, it finally becomes crystal clear, 3 weeks after the campaign started, that the goal is not West Virginia or Ohio or Baltimore or Washington. Indeed, Robert E. Lee is coming to Pennsylvania. Lee's entire Second Corps, again, Allegheny Johnson, Robert Rhodes, Jubal Early, commanding those 3 divisions, arrive in Pennsylvania on 2 parallel columns, skirting in the middle of the Cumberland Valley. And on the other side of the mountains, at Gettysburg, comes one of the Pennsylvania Volunteer Militia regiments. They've arrived by train, but their train has hit a cow about 10 kilometers east of Gettysburg. These untrained soldiers, most of whom, again, are city boys or coal miners, etc., they don't want to march the 6 miles, 10 kilometers or so from New Oxford to Gettysburg. They're going to sit in place, butcher the cow that their train had hit, and throw a giant party, inviting the girls at Gettysburg to come out in their carriages for band music, dancing, and an ox roast. In the meantime, the few members of the state militia unit, emergency men that can fire guns and know how to use one, are sent to Gettysburg. They miss the ox roast, much to their displeasure, and they are sent to guard the mountain passes at Cashtown and Fairfield, just to make sure that Jubal Early doesn't turn to the east and start moving towards Gettysburg. This is Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. This is the one of the major towns in the Cumberland Valley. It's a town that Jeb Stuart had destroyed all the railroad facilities in 1862. Here in 1863, this is going to be the concentration point for the Army of Northern Virginia. And in 1864, John McCausland will burn the town to the ground, destroying more than half the buildings. So Chambersburg will be invaded 3 years in a row by the Confederates. It will be the only significant town in Pennsylvania, in fact, in the entire northern United States, to be invaded 3 years in a row. It's in Chambersburg that a courier reaches Richard Ewell. And for the first time, General Ewell learns his objective is Harrisburg. So it's not until June 22nd, 1863, that Ewell learns for sure that he's supposed to go to Harrisburg. Now, this order, if Harrisburg comes within your means, capture it, is perhaps the pivotal moment in the entire Gettysburg campaign. As mentioned, Stonewall Jackson's dead. Jackson had long advocated, give me 36,000 men and I will take the war to the banks of the Susquehanna River. If Jackson got these orders, I will wager to bet that Jackson has his men on the road within an hour after receiving the orders and starts marching to Harrisburg. But Richard Ewell is not Stonewall Jackson. Richard Ewell will wait 4 days before he starts moving to Harrisburg. So we've had a 3-day delay caused by the Second Battle of Winchester. Now we're going to have a 4-day delay caused by Richard Ewell. That's 7 days that the Confederates lose in their attempt to attack Harrisburg will become pivotal to United States history. I've long had people ask me, what if Stonewall Jackson was at Gettysburg? And my answer is there is never a Battle of Gettysburg if Stonewall Jackson's still alive. They don't fight at Gettysburg. Jackson goes and takes Harrisburg. And so Gettysburg's there is no battle ever fought at that point in time because Stonewall's on the road long before Richard Ewell. So here is your quick geography lesson. This is the South Central Pennsylvania. I live in York, PA, named, of course, for the English city. I live right about where the K is in York. You see Gettysburg to the left in Adams County, York County in the center. To the right is the Susquehanna River running roughly from the center of Harrisburg down to the Maryland border. The bottom of the map is the Mason-Dixon line leading to Maryland. You see the railroads. Again, one of Lee's key goals was railroads, and the United States government decides to defend the railroad crossings as best they can. Again, we have 10,000 soldiers in Harrisburg protecting the 2 bridges there. If you go downriver from Harrisburg, at Bainbridge, Pennsylvania, there's a small ford. So the U.S. is going to put about 200 state militiamen, again with 3 days of training, to protect that crossing. The only other bridge on the Susquehanna River between Harrisburg and Maryland is the Wrightsville. That happens to be the world's longest covered bridge. And that, of course, is a key railroad crossing leading to Philadelphia. So the 5 places marked with a star are the places that the government is going to try to slow the Confederates down. Everybody realizes that you can't beat Robert E. Lee with the state militia and the New York and New Jersey men. It's not going to happen. But what can happen and what must happen if you're a Union commander is you got to keep Lee off the river. You got to destroy the ability of Robert E. Lee to cross those river bridges by either destroying them, burning them, or defending them, as in the case of Harrisburg. But this is what the geography looks like. Gettysburg is of no importance at that point other than the fact that it's the western terminus of the railroad. And so we're going to send about 800 of the state militia to Gettysburg to protect the railhead. These are the 2 bridges that I mentioned in Harrisburg. The covered bridge on the left is the passenger bridge. The bridge in the background is the railroad bridge. Again, this is the only access to Harrisburg short of wading the river, which at that point in time would have been very difficult to do, particularly with artillery. And in the foreground is where the Union Army is going to put some fortifications to try to protect the river. Here's the other bridge. This is the one at Wrightsville and Columbia here in York County. And again, as mentioned, it is the only bridge south of Harrisburg on the way to Maryland. So these become the defensive points. Richard Ewell, realizing that the only way to take Harrisburg was to go across those bridges, decides to split his Second Corps up now that they're in Pennsylvania. As mentioned, he spends 4 days formulating his plan and getting things in motion. He's going to send Rhodes' division and Johnson's division northeast on the Valley Turnpike through the Shenandoah/Cumberland Valley towards Harrisburg, screened by mounted infantry under Albert Gallatin Jenkins. He's going to send the remaining division, 1/3 of his men, about 6,600 soldiers under Jubal Early. They will follow the turnpike through Gettysburg to York, destroying the railroad. Again, this is the key railroad that delivers coal to the U.S. Navy at the Baltimore Navy Yard. They want to destroy the train station and go get the bridge at Wrightsville. So Friday, June 26th, 1.3 inches of rain have fallen overnight. It's been a miserable, miserable night with horrible weather, lightning storms, massive amounts of rain coming down overnight. Most of the roads are covered in mud. But now is when Richard Ewell finally decides to go to Harrisburg. So he's going to send, as mentioned, Jubal Early with 6,600 men towards Gettysburg with their goal of going to York, and the rest of Ewell's column will head northeasterly through the Cumberland Valley, heading towards Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and on to Harrisburg. So we're going to follow Robert Rhodes briefly. He's going to head towards Carlisle. He will take Carlisle on Sunday, June 28th. Carlisle will become a significant military prize because it's the home of the United States Army Cavalry Training Base. And so Rhodes will take over and will burn the cavalry barracks at Carlisle. Meanwhile, on the same day, Jubal Early will cross into Adams County. He'll burn the Caledonia Iron Works owned by radical Republican United States Congressman Thaddeus Stevens, who has been advocating that the Northern troops in Virginia start burning civilian houses and civilian buildings to try to bring total war to the South, something that William T. Sherman will listen to in 1864 in the next year, and will do, of course, in Georgia. But Stevens wants this done in Virginia in 1863. Jubal Early is really angry about this United States congressman, and so he decides to start burning civilian property in Pennsylvania, particularly when he finds out that Stevens owns this ironworks. where he's got 200 African American men, mostly fugitive slaves from Virginia, or children of formerly fugitive slaves. That Stevens he's an Underground Railroad operator, and Stevens has been putting these people to work after they had escaped captivity. At the same time, Early's column is going to head towards Gettysburg. They are going to approach that on 2 o'clock on the afternoon of June 26th. I like to call the fighting on June 26th the First Battle of Gettysburg. Most people aren't aware that, you guys have been refighting the Second Battle of Gettysburg, the big battle, if you will. There are 1,000 monuments at Gettysburg to the Second Battle. There are 4 monuments on the Gettysburg battlefield to the First Battle, the June 26th skirmish, if you will. That takes place between elements of Jubal Early's division and the 26th Pennsylvania Volunteer Militia and associated militia cavalry in some very sharp fighting that goes on at 4 locations in and around Gettysburg on Friday, June 26th. The state militia is driven out of Gettysburg and Jubal Early's men will take the town. The first Union soldier to die in Pennsylvania dies at Gettysburg on June 26th. First soldier to die at Gettysburg dies on June 26th. Early's men will camp on Cemetery Hill. They've got the Evergreen Gatehouse. They have Seminary Ridge. They've got Oak Ridge. They've got all the high ground. Everything is under Confederate occupation. Here is Elijah White, who's Jubal Early's cavalry commander, as he rides into downtown Gettysburg on June 26th. Elijah White is the gentleman with the black plume on his hat doing his best Jeb Stuart impersonation. But the reason I call that your attention to him is that building behind him still stands in Gettysburg. That's the David Wills House. That is where Abraham Lincoln will stay on the night of November 18th. As he prepares to deliver the Gettysburg Address the next day. So again, the Confederates now have Gettysburg. Jubal Early will ransom the town for supplies as men will collect shoes. They will collect alcohol, particularly fresh rye whiskey from the summer harvest that has been distilled. They will take as much bread and canned goods and staples of food that they can find in Gettysburg Square. Again, you see Jubal Early is see the gentleman in the white coat at the bottom of the screen. The man next to him is Jubal Early. To the right of them are town council of Gettysburg surrendering the town to Jubal Early. But the Confederates don't want Gettysburg. The goal is not Gettysburg. Gettysburg's not strategic. The goal is Harrisburg, York, and the river. And so Jubal Early in the morning of Saturday, June 27th, all 6,600 Confederates leave the Gettysburg region. They don't want the town. It's not important. They want the river. And so you see the parallel movement towards the river on Saturday, June 27th, as the Confederates march into York County and continue their march in Robert Rhodes' case through Cumberland County. State militia is desperately going to try to hold them off, but the Confederates are going to capture town after town after town. Now, I bring up this town. This is Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, just northeast of Carlisle, between Carlisle and Harrisburg. What's interesting about this town is in this very building, this is the Railroad Hotel, Albert Gallatin Jenkins, who commands the cavalry attached to Ewell's Corps, Albert Gallatin Jenkins goes into the room to the right of the door, which is the tavern area, orders a pitcher of ice water, and puts his feet up on the table and has all the Harrisburg newspapers brought to him. He learns the exact defenses of the river crossing. They're all published in the newspaper. He knows the names of the Union commanders. He knows how many troops are there from New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. He knows exactly what's in front of him. It's one of the most egregious lapses in military intelligence in the Civil War. The complete defenses of Harrisburg are published in the newspaper for the Confederates to sit and read about 20 kilometers southwest of Harrisburg. Albert Jenkins has gathered all the intelligence the Confederates need. They know exactly who's at the river and where they are at, including the 22nd New York State National Guard. This is the key regiment guarding the bridge that leads, the railroad bridge that leads into Harrisburg. And again, Jenkins gets all their information, knows the name of the commander, knows all their men, knows exactly where everything is. Meanwhile, as Jubal Early and Robert Rhodes' men are encamped in Pennsylvania, they start seeing civilians making strange hand gestures and waving golden pieces of paper in the air and crying out, "Peace, peace," mostly in broken English, because most of these residents are German, peace-loving Democrats. But a group of confidence men from New York City have taken the train into South Central Pennsylvania in the weeks before the Battle of Gettysburg, and they've sold counterfeit tickets, membership cards, to the Knights of the Golden Circle. They know this region is anti-Lincoln. That's well known throughout the North at that point in time. And so they go to these poor German farmers and they tell them, when the Confederates arrive, if you buy this ticket from me, it's a membership card to this anti-Lincoln group. They'll know you're a friend of the South, and they won't bother you. As it turns out, these confidence men, all they want's the money from these poor farmers. And when the Confederates arrive and they find all these farmers waving these golden tickets and crying, "Peace, peace," the password supposedly of this anti-Lincoln group, the Confederates soon realize all the horses are still there, all the cows are still there, everything's still on the farms, because these peace Democrats have trusted New York City con men, and the rebels just seemingly clean up. Here in York County, where I live, Jubal Early will collect more than 1,000 horses from people waving these golden tickets. And I love this account by one of Jubal Early's cavalrymen. "We gave the old Dutch," that's Pennsylvania Germans, "in Pennsylvania fits. Army left a mark everywhere it went. Horses, cattle, sheep, hogs, chickens, spring houses suffered alike. They cried, 'Peace, peace,' most beautifully wherever we went." Peace, peace, of course, being the password of this anti-Lincoln group, the Knights of the Golden Circle. So now it's Saturday, June 28th. Everybody, this is the high water mark of the Confederacy. It's not Pickett's Charge. It's Saturday, June 28th. And the reason I call it the high water mark is the Susquehanna River is almost at flood stage. And so you're not going to walk across the river. You're going to need those bridges to attack Harrisburg. Jubal Early and his chief subordinate, John Gordon, are following the road from Gettysburg into York. They capture York that day. Meanwhile, the rebels are approaching the river towards Harrisburg. And here's where Gettysburg starts becoming important again. The 5th and 6th Michigan Cavalry under John T. Copeland in his last day commanding the brigade. He's going to be fired that day and replaced by a young firebrand captain by the name of George Armstrong Custer. Custer will be promoted on June 28th and will replace Copeland. But Copeland, in his last act, has sent 2 regiments of Michigan cavalry across the border into Pennsylvania. They're going to come to Gettysburg. The reason why this is now suddenly important is as the Confederates are concentrating, Ewell's Corps is concentrating going to the river, to the west over at Chambersburg, some 55, 60 kilometers west of Gettysburg, it comes Robert E. Lee, James Longstreet, George Pickett. All these guys are now arriving in Gettysburg, as well as A.P. Hill and all of Hill's men. So the entire Army of Northern Virginia is now widely scattered, and Gettysburg's right in the middle of it, and all the roads are going to lead to Gettysburg. So you're starting to get a feeling for why Gettysburg is going to become important in just 3 days. This is York, Pennsylvania. I know you guys are obviously intimately familiar with Yorkshire in the UK. York, Pennsylvania, of course, named for Yorktown. Jubal Early will capture York. At 8,600 people, it will be the largest town in the free states of the North to follow the Confederate Army in the entire Civil War. York, though, is a Copperhead town. We freely surrendered to Jubal Early. And on Sunday morning, June 28th, here comes General Early, General John Gordon, They arrive in downtown York. Church bells are ringing. Confederate flags are waving from the local hotel. Again, we're in Pennsylvania, a free northern state, and yet Confederate flags have somehow been smuggled into York, and they are waving to greet the Confederate army as they arrive in York. A little girl slips out to General John Gordon, gives him the complete plans of the river defenses of Wrightsville, written in a woman's flowery handwriting. So, although Stonewall Jackson's dead, his spy network is still that he had created between February and March of 1863 is still hard at work providing intelligence to the oncoming Confederates. York's flag will be taken down. Again, you see Elijah White with his plume hat there with one of his officers hauling down the U.S. flag. The general on horseback to the left is Jubal Early. The officer on the far right on the black horse is John Gordon. This is the only known eyewitness drawing done of the Confederates as they arrive in Pennsylvania as they haul down the flag. On 6 p.m. on Sunday, June 28th, about the same time that the spy Harrison is riding into Longstreet's camp at Chambersburg. If you've seen the movie Gettysburg, you'll understand what I'm talking about as the spy arrives with the news that George Meade is now commanding the Union Army, and the Union Army is now in Maryland. They're in hot pursuit coming. First time Lee has had that intelligence because Stuart is off riding with his cavalry. But at 6 p.m., John Gordon's Georgia Brigade will attack the Union positions at Wrightsville. They will this is what the defenses would have looked like. They will spend about 20 minutes or so softening the position with artillery, and then they will attack the Union entrenchments, forcing the state militia across the world's longest covered bridge into Lancaster County. They will set fire to the bridge as they're leaving. They'll have 4 civilians from Columbia actually light the torches. And the world's longest covered bridge. That's York County, where I live, in the background, Lancaster County in the foreground, and the state militia in the foreground marching across the bridge. The wind shifts, the entire town of Wrightsville catches on fire, and in an amazing act, the Confederate soldiers form bucket brigades, and they will actually pass water from the canal and the Susquehanna River beside the canal over into downtown Wrightsville, and they will save all but 6 buildings that are consumed by the flames, and they'll save almost all the town. It's an amazing act by Confederate soldiers to save a Pennsylvania town. Monday, June 29th, Robert E. Lee, having heard intelligence that the Union armies in Maryland threatening his lines of communication, decides to recall his army from the river. The attack on Harrisburg will never take place. He will have Early's men and Jenkins, Rhodes, Longstreet, Hill, Heath, everybody start concentrating. Heidlersburg and Cashtown, 2 small towns near Gettysburg, are going to be the concentration point. In the middle of that, on June 29th, the 5th and 6th Michigan, after spending the night in Gettysburg, withdraws with the intelligence that the Confederates are in every direction. There's Confederates to the west, Confederates to the north, Confederates to the east, and that intelligence will be brought to George Gordon Meade. That same day, there'll be the one lone Confederate attempt to cross the river at Harrisburg is stymied by a fight at Oysters Point near Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. Tuesday, June 30th, everybody's starting to march towards Gettysburg. John Buford has arrived in Gettysburg with the first of his United States Cavalry, 2 brigades of that. Jeb Stuart has arrived in Pennsylvania finally. His goal is to go to York and reunite with Jubal Early. He will instead encounter Judson Kilpatrick's Union Cavalry. They'll fight a battle on June 30th at Hanover. And Stuart will make the incorrect and fateful decision to go to York to try to find Jubal Early instead of turning towards the west or heading due north towards Abbottstown or East Berlin. So everybody starts concentrating at Gettysburg. And of course, there'll be one last battle in Cumberland County, as Albert Gallatin Jenkins will, not getting the orders to withdraw towards Heidlersburg and Cashtown, will still think his goal is to probe the Union defenses of Harrisburg. They'll fight the last battle before the Battle of Gettysburg at Sporting Hill. That same day, as mentioned, Jeb Stuart is fighting at Hanover, and most people aren't aware. Stuart's got 1 year to live. He's going to die in 1864 at the Battle of Yellow Tavern in Virginia, but he almost dies in Hanover, Pennsylvania. He and his aide, W.W. Blackford, are isolated when a group of West Virginia cavalrymen and Rhode Island cavalrymen approach them. They fire shots at Stuart and his subordinate, W.W. Blackford. These guys are mounted on Virginia ponies, and they're able to leap across what was then a 15-foot wide, 15-foot deep ditch or river stream, if you will. And Stuart and his men are able to jump this. The Union horses, being heavier, cannot. And Stuart will escape being either shot, wounded, or captured at Hanover. And like I said, a year later, his luck will run out when, again, alone in front of his troops, he will be shot and killed. So now we know why Gettysburg's fought the way it is. And you guys have been fighting Gettysburg all weekend. Now you see Jubal Worley arriving, Robert Rhodes arriving from the north and east, and now you know why they were there. Harry Heath arriving from the west. Sykes and Reynolds, Howard bringing the 5th Corps, the 11th Corps, and the 1st Corps, as well as Slocum's 12th Corps now arriving in south central Pennsylvania. And oh, by the way, Jeb Stuart, still not aware that he's supposed to be going to Heidlersburg and Cashtown and Gettysburg, decides that I can't find Early at York. I'm going to go find Richard Ewell and Robert Rhodes in Carlisle, and Stuart rides off to Carlisle. He's not looking to get his name in the northern newspapers. He's not gallivanting. He's not glory hunting. He has wrong intelligence, and he's following Robert E. Lee's original orders to find Jubal Worley along the Susquehanna River. And if you can't find Jubal Worley, find Robert Rhodes along the river. So Stuart's actually obeying orders, although many people badly misconstrue his ride in Pennsylvania as being a joyride. It's not. But now the Battle of Gettysburg, of course, begins on July 1st. 1 out of every 4 Confederate soldiers that marched through the Cumberland Valley and Susquehanna Valleys will become casualties on July 1st, 2nd, 3rd. In the ultimate irony, about 400 or 500 men that had marched through Gettysburg on June 26th are now casualties at Gettysburg on July 1st, 2nd, 3rd. A town that they never expected to march back into, that they had captured on June 26th. So hopefully now you guys have a better understanding of why Gettysburg was fought the way it was, why the Confederate troops arrived in the order and the timing they did on the first day, and why the Union forces were desperately trying to arrive at the town throughout July 1st and 2nd. So on behalf of my publisher, Savas Beatty, my co-author, Eric Wittenberg, I want to thank you gamers for your kind attention today. May your dice be hot and your beers be cold. Have a great day.
Thank you very much, Scott.
So I want to thank you guys again. As mentioned, I figure you guys knew everything about the battle. If not, you've been fighting the battle. But as mentioned, this, what happened in Pennsylvania in the weeks before the battle is certainly not well known. And that's what we want to stress today to give you a better idea. Now start the gaming. No. But I want to again say thanks. Do we have time for a few questions?
Yeah. If you could, please, Scott, that would be great. Does anyone have any questions yet?
Can I just ask, thank you for your talk, but can I just, if they did capture Harrisburg, what effect do you think they would have had?
That's a great question. I believe, and I think a lot of the similar scholars here in Pennsylvania believe the same, that if Harrisburg would have fallen, the governor, wherever he would have went off to, would have sent messages to Abraham Lincoln basically saying Harrisburg's fallen, what's going to happen. Now, it is believed that the Confederates were in position then to send a message through envoys they had with access to Union intelligence officers, that they would have sent a message to Abraham Lincoln that we are willing to negotiate the trade of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania for Southern independence. So if Harrisburg would have fallen, perhaps there would have been two United States, or, a formerly United States and a new Confederate States of America. I'll submit to you, having grown up in Ohio and the Midwest, that had the United States fractured, they would have fractured even further, because Midwesterners didn't particularly like New Englanders, and Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Minnesota, Nebraska, etc., might have left themselves into a third country, and the U.S. would have splintered into at least two pieces, possibly, and I stress the word possibly, three. But again, the key goal would have been, I think the Confederates would have ransomed Harrisburg for Southern independence. That was kind of what Jackson had been advocating all along. So Jackson's, obviously not going to see what happens, but that's what probably would have happened.
Scott, could I ask your view on what the difference in quality was between the troops on the Confederate side in this campaign as compared with those on the Union side? You mentioned a lot of recruits being brought in without too much training at one stage. How do you view the relative quality of the armies at the battle?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the state militia obviously are not involved in the Battle of Gettysburg. They're still up at Harrisburg and York, etc. They will get involved in the pursuit of Lee. But if you look at the Army of Northern Virginia, there's a couple things to keep in mind. First with them, Lee had left behind some of his better trained troops to protect Richmond. In their place, there were some relatively inexperienced troops under Junius Daniel and a few other commanders. But by and large, most of Lee's troops were veterans of the Army of Northern Virginia. They had fought at Chancellorsville, they'd been at Fredericksburg, they had been at Bull Run. So Lee's army's in really good shape. What's the problem for Lee's army is A.P. Hill and Richard Ewell. Stonewall Jackson, of course, is gone, so he's got two new commanders. He's split up his corps. He's got new men commanding divisions that hadn't been commanding divisions previously. He's got line officers that have been promoted. So Lee's force, while very high morale and extremely experienced, some of the leaders have never been tested at their positions, most notably Hill and Ewell. The Union Army, by contrast, morale's been really low, but as they march to Pennsylvania, the morale is starting to pick up because a lot of their soldiers are from Pennsylvania, they're from New York, etc. They understand the gravity of the situation, that, you're fighting to defend the Union, you need to win. The problem that George Gordon Meade has is he's been in command since, the morning of June 28th. Some of his subordinate officers are still Hooker supporters, don't really trust Meade, particularly Dan Sickles and people like that, Andrew Humphreys, etc., David Birney. There are a lot of Hooker supporters still in the ranks, and about 1/5 of the Union Army of the Potomac had mustered out after Chancellorsville. So in their places are a lot of green troops. Standard's Vermont Brigade, for example, a number of other men are green with total inexperience, have never fought a battle before. But by and large, these two armies are, have enough experienced troops and enough experienced officers, as you know, that, they're pretty much on equal footing. I think that the Army in Northern Virginia, frankly, this is their last great chance. Following Gettysburg, they're really never going to be a significant offensive force again. But I mean, the armies are pretty good, but there are certainly, as you guys know from fighting the battle, there's scatterings of green troops in the wrong locations.
Thank you. Any other questions that we would like to raise?
I believe you're a war colonel yourself, Scott. Have you ever seen the Confederates win?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have gained Gettysburg extensively for 40 years. both on computer games as board games and as well as miniatures. In fact, I play Johnny Reb a lot. Johnny Reb 3 being my favorite rule set. I also play Fire and Fury a lot. For the Confederates to win Gettysburg, three things typically have to happen. Number one, they have to be more aggressive on July 1st. Jubal Early has got to get his men in movement. Allegheny Johnson's got to do something instead of sitting around doing nothing. And most importantly, Richard Herron Anderson. I wrote a book on the second day of Gettysburg, which I was very critical of Anderson in that book, and I've become even more critical of Anderson in the years since I wrote that book. Richard Herron Anderson does absolutely nothing on July 1st, nothing at all, just sits around. So the Confederates can win Gettysburg if Anderson and Early join forces with Rhodes and attack Cemetery Hill aggressively. That will work. If they don't do that on July 2nd, the way to win the battle is, believe it or not, if Dan Sickles stays put along where he's supposed to be, the Confederates crash right through that almost every time. And so Sickles moving forward, although it costs him his leg and it costs the Third Corps, what that does is buy enough time for the Fifth Corps and the 12th Corps to get in position to protect it. If Sickles sits back on Cemetery Ridge and Longstreet rips into him on Cemetery Ridge, it's surprising how quickly Sickles' line will crumble, and he doesn't buy enough time for the Fifth Corps to arrive. So that's kind of an interesting scenario. And the final scenario is the one that, believe it or not, was always advocated by John Bell Hood, and that's swing Longstreet, don't attack Little Round Top, swing Longstreet's entire corps to the south, block the roads to Washington and Baltimore, and force the Yankees to fight their way out of the trap. Only in those three scenarios have I ever won the Battle of Gettysburg. But when you play those scenarios, they win a lot. Not, maybe 30-40% of the time. It's still mostly a Union victory because there's just simply way too many Yankees. But those are really the only scenarios in which the South wins. Have you guys had any thoughts yourselves? Have you guys ever refought the battle? What have you found?
Well, we did fight it this weekend. It would be fair to say it was a pretty tough job for the Confederates.
The way it plays out, there's too many Yankees arriving in too many different spots for the Confederates to break through.
Yeah.
I mean, July 1st is their chance. I mean, it's the only real chance they have is July 1st.
Yes, exactly. Perfect.
Right.
Well, Scott, thank you so much once again. It's been an absolute pleasure having you, and thank you for the insights on the movements before the battle. That's something we knew, well, certainly I knew nothing about, and it's been very insightful to hear that. It's been great. Thank you so much
guys.
for joining
I appreciate it again. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Scott. All the best.
Thanks. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.
All the best. Bye-bye.